But perhaps the most volatile issue facing lawmakers right now, the debate over proposed new gun safety measures. This weekend marked 100 days since the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre, and gun reform advocates are clearly frustrated with the lack of action from lawmakers. Organizers are planning a day of action this Thursday with events aimed at reducing gun violence across the country. With the future of an assault weapons ban hanging in the balance and the future of background checks also uncertain, this week New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg's group, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, announced it will shell out $12 million on a TV ad campaign in 13 states.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Now, the ad targets senators, both Democrats and Republicans, who might be on the fence but open to backing a package of federal gun law reforms. Mayor Bloomberg told NBC's David Gregory on Meet the Press that lawmakers are going to spurn the public at their peril.
If 90% of the public want something and their representatives vote against that, common sense says they are going to have a price to pay for that.
Now, later in the same program, Mr. Common Sense himself, the NRA's Wayne LaPierre, dismissed the mayor's campaign as a mere vanity project.
And he can't spend enough of his $27 billion to try to impose his will on the American public. They don't want him in their restaurants. They don't want him in their homes. They don't want him telling them what food to eat. They sure don't want him telling them what self-defense firearms to own. And he can't buy America.
Right, because of course the NRA never tries to use its financial resources to influence opinions. And Wayne LaPierre also seems to forget that Mayor Bloomberg actually doesn't need to buy public opinion on this issue because the majority of Americans agree with him. Between 85 and 91% of Americans support universal background checks in recent polls, and that includes 85% of gun owners. So more than 100 days after Newtown, why is so much political courage needed to simply stand up for the will of the people? For more on this, I want to bring in our panel. With us from Dallas, conservative strategist Celia Bigelow, and here in New York, Stephen Barton, a survivor of the Aurora movie theater shooting, now with Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Celia, I want to start with you and sort of get your take on this issue of background checks. As we just saw in the polling there, you've got 85 to 91% of Americans supporting universal background checks, and that includes 85% of gun owners. And yet Wayne LaPierre says the whole thing is a hoax, it's a dishonest premise, and it's all about taking away or confiscating your guns. Do you really agree with that?
Well, what I think needs to be done is we need to strengthen the system we already have. And the fact of the matter is that nearly 80,000 people failed background checks last year, half of which were failed because of a felony indictment or conviction. And out of the half of those people that failed background checks and were failed because of a felony indictment, only 44 were prosecuted. What we need to be doing...
I actually heard Wayne LaPierre repeat those statistics a few times, and when I dug in a little bit deeper, the truth of the matter is that a lot of times these prosecutions don't end up happening at the federal level. They happen at a lower level, and a lot of times, if someone fails a background check, it's not necessarily there will not necessarily be the rationale to then pursue a federal case. So there are a lot of other details into why, what's really behind these numbers. But the fundamental question I have for you is, why would we oppose something that, you've got law enforcement officials and the general public saying, we want this, we believe this will help?
Well, let's take a look in what is involved in some of these background checks that are, for say, in the bill that is actually being proposed by Chuck Schumer of New York. What we have here is some very ridiculous things that are included in this bill, including the fact that if you have a lost or stolen gun and you don't report it in 24 hours, that's a felony, and you will be sent to jail for 5 years. And actually, I have a very close family member who has done a lot of moving, and he has lost an antique rifle of his. It's probably somewhere in his packages, but he would have been jailed for 5 years had he not reported this gun.
I think it's pretty clear that,
the
goal here is pretty clearly to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands of criminals and those who shouldn't have them. I want to move on.
But
Stephen,
we know that... Sorry.
Go ahead. Finish
we
your
know
point.
that criminals are not going to follow the law. They're not following the law right now.
Of course
and this
they're
is
not,
just
but
making it much
serves
harder
as a deterrent,
for law-abiding citizens it's making it much harder for law-abiding citizens to own guns.
Well, Celia, I think that actually the point is that it would serve as a
felon.
It would serve as a deterrent actually for non-law-abiding citizens. But
true.
I want to switch, Stephen. So the opposition to these reforms is bringing out some pretty questionable kind of actions. We've got the NRA issuing sort of these targeted robocalls in the area around Newtown. So let's take a listen to this.
This week, despite an outcry of public opposition, anti-gun legislators are aggressively pursuing numerous proposals that are designed to disarm and punish law-abiding gun owners and sportsmen.
So in addition to being a survivor of a gun shooting yourself, you live in the Newtown area. We have seen reports that obviously a lot of the folks in Newtown are just outraged that they've been targeted with these robocalls. What's your reaction?
I mean, honestly, it's not surprising. It's nothing new when it comes to the gun lobby, the National Rifle Association. I mean, we saw it on Sunday with Wayne LaPierre. I mean, a complete insensitivity to the wishes and opinions of the American public at large, but more specifically to survivors of gun violence who really want to see reform to our broken gun laws.
And so just since you're working with Mayor Bloomberg's group, these ads that you've put out that are going to be targeting both Democrats and Republicans, do you expect that's going to help move the needle or try to raise the temperature for members of Congress when they come back?
I really do. I mean, for so long, the NRA has been the only player in the game. They've been the ones who have basically been alone in talking about gun policy, but now there's a new player. And there are several new players, Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly as well. So, I mean, I really believe the tide is turning. Politicians are finally going to be held accountable for spurning, what a majority of the American public wants in our laws.
I hope you're right, because some are a little bit less hopeful, but I do hope you're right. Celia, the White House today said that it was pleased that there is going to be a vote on an amendment for an assault weapons ban in the Senate. This was in response to those mass shootings like Newtown and Aurora, where Stephen was shot. But you've written that the AR-15, a woman wouldn't want to be stuck at home without one, despite studies that show women are actually nearly 3 times more likely to be murdered if they have a gun in their home.
Well, I personally bought my AR-15 for home defense, and the fact is that I don't want to be stuck at home without one, because what if multiple intruders entered my home and they were armed? What if I didn't have a gun? I would be out of luck. And if multiple intruders came into my home and I only had the 3 bullets that Mayor Bloomberg is fighting for, the fact of the matter is that I would be out of luck, because 3 bullets isn't going to get the job done. For example, what if I miss? But
you know what? Here's the problem I have with that argument, Celia. I mean, even Justice Scalia talked about these same kind of weapons of war in the Heller decision, where he said,
weapons of war.
Yes, it is. An AR-15 is based on the M16. The AR-15 is based on the M16, and essentially it is a weapon of war that, even as I say, even Justice Scalia acknowledged
should have. Is it a weapon of war because of cosmetics?
Even Justice Scalia acknowledged.
It is a semi-automatic rifle.
Do you want to answer the question, or do you want to?
That means it's the same as a handgun, a semi-automatic handgun.
But even Justice Scalia has acknowledged that our rights don't come without some kinds of restrictions. And so when you're talking about the AR-15, which is modeled on the M16, it is a weapon of war.
Sorry, it looks scary.
Well, you know what? Here's why I raised this with you. Stephen, you've said that if the AR-15 that the shooter in Aurora hadn't jammed, you would be dead. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right?
I absolutely believe that. And, sure, in an AR-15, it looks scary, but it also is far more deadly than a handgun. I mean, it's easier to manage. The recoil is less. The bolts are fired at a higher velocity. The effects of an AR-15 are devastating. When ambulances were called to the scene in Sandy Hook Elementary School, none of the victims were alive, or even had any chance. They were pronounced all dead on arrival. And so, I mean, this isn't a cosmetic difference, and to suggest so is an insult to everyone who has ever been affected by that sort of violence.
That's not a fair argument.
You know what, Celia? We're going to leave it there. Let's respect Stephen's opinion. Celia Bigelow, Stephen Barton, thank you both.